of the Contra Costa County Authority Board to order at 6 o'clock. And I think Terry Ann has let enough people in that. Terry Ann, can you please call the roll?
Yes, if we could run the video first.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you.
Need somebody to keep me.
Due to COVID-19, this meeting will be conducted as a Zoom meeting pursuant to the provisions of Assembly Bill 361, which suspends certain requirements of the Brown Act. This meeting is being live streamed on the CCTA website. The chair will call upon members, staff, and other speakers by name. Please speak clearly and state your name before giving comments or remarks. Persons participating via Zoom with their cameras enabled are reminded that their activities are visible to viewers. Members participating by Zoom wishing to speak should physically raise their hand and unmute their mic when called upon. Members should mute their mics when done speaking. Citizens participating by Zoom wishing to speak should use the Raise Hand feature or dial *9 if participating via phone, and the chair or staff will call upon them at the appropriate time. Citizens will have 3 minutes to speak. After 3 minutes, staff will lower their hand and mute their mic. Participants via phone will be called upon by the last 4 digits of their phone number. It is requested that public speakers state their names and organization, but providing such information is voluntary. Written public comments received in accordance with the teleconferencing special notice for public comment guidelines are printed on the meeting agenda. If authors of the written correspondence would like to speak, they should raise their hand and the chair will call upon them at the appropriate time. All written correspondence received after that and during the meeting will be entered into the record. A roll call vote will be taken for all action items. Thank you for participating in a meeting of the Contra Costa Transportation Authority.
Thank you. And now, Terry Ann, will you please conduct the roll call?
Yes, thank you. Commissioner Arnrich.
Here.
Commissioner Fedeli.
Here.
Commissioner Glover.
Here.
Commissioner Haskew.
Here.
Commissioner Hudson.
Here.
Commissioner Mitchell.
Here.
Thank you. Commissioner Nowak.
Here.
Commissioner Thor. He was absent at the moment. Commissioner White. Okay, absent. Vice Chair Kelly.
Here.
Chair Geringer.
Here.
Representative Allen.
Here.
Representative Powers.
Here.
Representative Worth.
Here.
Okay, we have everyone present with the exception of Thorpe and White, and we have Commissioner Fedeli attending for Commissioner Butt.
Great. Thank you, Terry Ann. And now we will move on to our next item on the agenda, which is the Pledge of Allegiance. And Commissioner Arnrich will lead us in the pledge, and I request everyone else to please mute your microphone. Thank you, Commissioner.
Please join me by placing your hand over your heart. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Two.
Thank you. And now we'll move on to the next item on the agenda, which is public comment. And this is public comment for items that are not on our agenda tonight, but are within the purview of the authority board. And Terry Ann, have we received any written public comment on items not on the agenda?
We have not received any written public comment, and I do want to note that Commissioner Thorpe just arrived.
Great. Thank you. Welcome, Commissioner. And if there are any members of the public who would like to speak to an item that is not on our agenda, please raise your hand, either the virtual hand or your real hand, and we will invite you to speak. And so the first hand I saw was Jordan's iPhone, or Jordan probably.
Sorry, just give me one moment to get it set up.
Great. Thank you, Terry Ann.
You're welcome. Sorry, I was having issues the other day with this. Let me try again. Oh, I'm having issues sharing my screen right now.
So we can just do it the old fashioned way with somebody.
Yeah,
Doing
I
the
can
time.
I'll run it on my phone. Sorry.
Okay, that's fine.
Fine.
Thank you. And now I've lost Jordan. But Jordan, if you want to, oh, there you are. If you want to unmute yourself and share your comments, that will be great.
Okay. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, yeah. My name is Jordan DeStabler. I'm a resident of the Point Richmond neighborhood district.
So,
And
Jordan,
yes.
I'm sorry to interrupt you, but is this on the item that the presentation about the?
No, I thought
Oh,
we were.
okay.
Yeah, this is not.
Okay, great.
Attending to your agenda.
Just your address, maybe
Yes.
where you're from made me wonder. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. I just wanted to strongly support Commissioner, aka Mayor Butt's line items concerning his criticism of the Marin Municipal Water District pipeline as it's presently being presented. I agree.
Oh,
Yes.
I'm sorry. So that item is next on our agenda with the presentation. We're not voting on it tonight, but we will be hearing it and we will do
Okay.
public comment at
Okay.
that time.
Okay.
Okay?
Thank you.
you. And thank you for your patience on that.
Sure.
Is there anyone else who wants to speak to an item that is not on the agenda? And we will allow opportunity during the presentation that we're going to hear tonight. So Terry Ann, do you see any hands? I
No
don't see
public
any.
comment. Oh,
Okay.
actually, sorry, a hand did just get raised by Doug.
Okay, welcome Doug. You want to unmute and, oh wait, are you queuing up for the item when it comes up?
I'm not sure. I just wanted to speak on the whole water.
Yeah, so we'll give you an opportunity to do that in just a moment.
All right.
Okay,
Thank you.
So-
I'll mute.
okay, thank you. Okay, so since I'm not seeing any hands for folks who want to speak to items not on the agenda, we will move on to the next item, which is presentations. And we have presentation this evening from multiple agencies on the Richmond San Rafael Bridge. And Hisham Noemi will introduce the item and the speakers. And Hisham, welcome and thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good evening, everybody. My name is Hisham Noemi. I'm the Director of Programming at the Authority. We have several guests with us this evening that will co-present this item. I want to start by introducing them. First, we have Mr. David Ambwell, who is the Chief Deputy Director of Caltrans District 4. Also, we have Andy Fremier, the Chief Deputy Director, Executive Director of Operations at BATA MTC. We also have Ann Richmond, the Executive Director of Transportation Authority of Marin. And last but not least, we have Paul Sellier, Director of Operations at Marin Water Municipal District. Thank you all for being here tonight. This is an informational item. I hope you can still hear me. This is an informational item. No action is requested tonight. I wanted to note that we received a large number of public comments that were included in the packet, as well as the meeting handout. Before we start with the presentation, I just wanted to start with a bit of history on this item. As you may recall, in April 2018, the eastbound third lane of the lower deck of the Richmond San Rafael Bridge opened to traffic. And in November 2019, the multi-use path on the upper deck opened. Both projects are 4-year pilots, and UC Berkeley is conducting an evaluation that's expected to be done in 2024. At the same time the two pilots started, it was also agreed that TAM would conduct a traffic study to look at the potential use of the upper deck shoulder for westbound AM peak period third lane. BATA and Caltrans were also working on the structural analysis of the bridge. At the same time, BATA has also been advancing the design of the Richmond San Rafael Bridge forward improvements as well, and there were also significant improvements at both ends of the bridge for pedestrian bicycle access. We do have a presentation for you. Let me share my screen. Can you see it? Okay, great.
Yes.
So tonight, the presenters will cover the agenda you see on the slide, including the recent development on the proposed marine water pipeline. I will now hand it over to David to start, and it'll be great if you can ask any questions at the end of the presentations. So David, you want to take it from here?
Well, next slide, please. I believe.
Yes.
Yeah, I believe Andy Vermeer was going to jump in with this one.
Thank you, Dave. Yeah, this is Andrew Vermeer, Deputy Executive Director, Operations at the Metropolitan Transportation Commission and the Bay Area Toll Authority. You know, we operate the bridge with Caltrans as joint venture partners, but BATA took on the responsibility of dealing with an asset management study early on in this discussion and concluded that work, as is shown in the slide, in June of 2020. The real high-level observations are that the bridge is actually in pretty good shape. It's well maintained by the California Department of Transportation and the Bay Area Toll Authority. There's no need to immediately replace it for any kind of structural issues. The replacement costs really control over the maintenance costs. We did take a look at, you know, what it would take to deal with a new bridge repair or a new bridge. And have certainly felt that it's better to keep investing in the bridge itself and take a more measured look at what a replacement might be, really with good engineering and planning information so that we could do it on a schedule that makes sense. And that's really the conclusion of the asset management work.
Yeah, thank you. And so for the structural load rating update, just a little background, load ratings are an FHWA requirement. These ratings need to be periodically updated. Typically, bridges are re-rated when a bridge is modified, if member conditions change, or dead loads and vehicle live loadings change. The existing load rating for Richmond Santa Fe was considered out of date for an FHWA review and was included in the plan for re-rating. Additionally, over the years, federal legislation such as MAP 21 and the FAST Act have added new legal vehicles, specialized hauling vehicles, emergency vehicles that are much heavier than they used to be. And that warranted a new load rating for the bridges on the interstate system. We now consider 20 different vehicle types when performing a load rating, which included 12 legal trucks and 8 permit configurations. These new legal vehicles, as well as the outdated load rating, both contributed to the Richmond Santa Fe Bridge requiring a reevaluation. So we worked with the Bay Area Toll Authority and their consultants on a load rating of the Richmond Santa Fe Bridge. And we determined that there were some gusset plates around the navigational channels that needed to be strengthened. So we've already started that project. We have a contractor on board, and that work should complete by the spring of 2022. Next slide. All right. So these projects that you see here, the all electronic tolling was completed already in 2021 by BATA. The next project, it's ongoing. We are painting the structural steel members on the lower deck from piers 1 through 48. So that takes it from Richmond, basically across the 2 navigational channels. We're also completing replacements of 20 joints in the deck. This is a project that is $45 million, started in April and will complete in the summer of 2023. The next project is an outcome of that load rating study that I just mentioned. We are retrofitting some gusset plates. It is a $12.7 million project. The field work has already started, and we anticipate completion in the spring of 2022. And we coordinate all of the lane closures with the existing paint project that is out there currently. We have an upcoming project on the Richmond-San Rafael Bridge, the electrical substation upgrade. It should be out by the end of this year with work starting in the spring. It's a $6.7 million upgrade to our electrical substations. The existing electrical equipment on the Richmond-San Rafael Bridge is showing signs of wear and tear from age and the saltwater environment. The current equipment is also several generations behind what is available now. And in addition, new communication systems, electronic security, monitoring, and upgraded lighting all require more power. So we're replacing and upgrading the 4 existing electrical substations. Next slide.
So
Right.
Dave, thank you. This is where we take off again. This is the Bay Area Toll Authority's series of projects that are really designed to really test out the theory of both the running lane on the lower deck during peak use and the bike and pedestrian path on the upper deck. So as Hisham mentioned, we have a series of projects underway. The first was opened in 2018 and it's been very successful, and it's a peak period use in the eastbound direction on the lower deck. In November of 19, we opened up the bike and pedestrian path. That has also been very successful as a recreational project. And then we are planning on connecting the work in the San Rafael area with some additional work that's coming up in that Francisco Boulevard East area. Next slide. So what are the pilot projects evaluating? First of all, the work that's doing the evaluation is being performed by both the California Department of Transportation headquarters staff and the folks at UC Berkeley PATH program. They're providing both before and after data, as well as evaluating periodically how the project is working today. That work started in the summer of 2018 and will be completed when the pilot period is over in the summer of 24. The scope does include collecting data on the usage of the bike and pedestrian lanes. It also looks at the traffic impacts, maintenance impacts, other incident information that we learn from the pilot. We have quarterly meetings where we discuss the work and the progress of it and their intermediate findings. And then that will lead to a final report, as I mentioned, in the summer of 24. We don't expect on making a final decision on the various pilots until the completion of the studies, but we are continually trying to improve incident response and any lessons that we learn from the current operations that happen out on a daily basis. Next slide. So what are we seeing? In general, we're seeing quite a bit of use in the summer and in the nice weather, which is not a surprise. We are happy with the amount of ridership on it. There's about 3,500 to 4,500 trips on the weekends and about 2,300 to 3,300 trips during the weekdays. It turns out to be one of the more successful bike paths on the various bridge corridors. So that part of it is certainly a positive result. Next slide. Most important to folks, in particular in the Richmond side, is what happens in terms of accidents and incidents. So let me explain the graph on the left a little bit. The blue line really deals with the bike path itself. And if you look on the left, it shows the number of incidents back in July of 2016. As you move on the right, you'll see the bicycle icon. That's when the bike path opened. The height of the incidents chart in blue really represents the number of incidents that are happening. As you can see, there's been somewhat of a calming effect, at least in the early goings. The same is really true of the peak period use lane that follows the same process in purple. The car icon identifies when it opened for cars. And in both cases, we've seen somewhat of a reduction in incidents. We have an incident management plan that we manage very closely and try to make improvements on. We try to achieve an incident response time of 30 minutes. We've added all kinds of information on the bridge itself to help incident response. We've provided a lot of training and equipment for both CHP, Caltrans, and the fire departments on both sides of the bridge. They actually have small vehicle access that can use the bike path behind the barrier. And that's been very successful. And we've continued to adjust. So we learned very quickly that radio frequencies were hard to follow across the length of the bridge. We've improved that. Unfortunately, we had a suicide on the bridge. We've added features that are very similar to the Golden Gate Bridge response, and they've been proven to be successful so far. And so I think the point here is we're not seeing a lot of additional incidents. We are meeting our response times, and we are continuing to evaluate improvements as we go forward. Next slide. This is another slide that talks about the clearance times and how long it takes us to do incident response. So there's a lot of dots on the chart. They really show how long an incident is in place. And what you really see on the upper red letters is we had about 43 minutes in about 256 incidents in the time period before the westbound path was opened. We have seen there's been about 100 incidents, in which case the average has been about 52 minutes to respond. Several were significant incidents, though, that really do kind of skew the timing a little bit. So it does seem to be pretty much consistent. On the right, we talk about what kinds of crashes are happening. And again, we've seen that there's been a little bit of a drop in accidents, but our response time has been about as quick as before and after the barrier. So again, we see that as a positive, but there's clearly more work to be done because incidents are impactful, especially to the Point Richmond area, and we're concerned about that. Next slide. I think this part we're moving into the Marin presentation, I believe. Is that correct? Or are we still, slides are a little out of order from what I was expecting.
I think there's a couple of the RSR
forward?
forward slides after this, Andy. So
Great, thank you, Ann.
Yep.
Maybe go back to that one. The purpose, I'm sorry, the previous slide. Thank you. One thing I think we all realize is traffic is rebounding. What we're seeing in the average traffic that's happening during the morning hours through the day is what you see on the bottom axis of the last chart. And the volumes coming through the plaza are very similar as to what was seen before the COVID experience. So traffic is back. And clearly, as you see in the right-hand slide, we are approaching very much similar traffic numbers as we saw before COVID. We had started work, though, on a series of improvements that we are still working hard on and think are the right approach to improving traffic. And so if we can go to the next slide, I'll talk a little bit about the sequence of projects we call and have branded Richmond San Rafael Forward. We've invested with both Richmond and Marin in a commute program where we try to find rebates and incentives for people to buy electronic bikes. We are trying to improve the first and last mile connections to transit. We're looking and have had a couple of successful projects, in particular in Richmond, on what we call quick build projects that provide bike access in a safe way. We're coordinating with Richmond San Rafael Rides to really advertise the availability of the path, and also working with employers to try to improve the commute management technology. On the right, we have a series of civil improvements that we think will also be helpful. The first is, now that we're in an all electronic environment, we are going to remove the toll booths in the coming years and have what we call open road tolling, which you won't have the obstacles of the booths in your way. We're also looking at reinstituting the HOV lane that was removed a few years ago, at least back as far as Regatta Boulevard. That gives a real priority to transit and high occupancy vehicle usage in the lane. And then obviously trying to continue to work on closing the gaps that bikes have in making a safe traverse across the corridor. Next slide. The open road tolling projects and the HOV lane extension are currently underway. We expect them to be operational by 2024. And we're doing quite a bit of analysis on what we can do about the Richmond Parkway interchange. That does still seem to be one of the biggest bottlenecks that we don't have solutions for yet, but we are doing quite a bit of engineering analysis in partnership with the Contra Costa TA and TAM and Caltrans. And we're hoping to come up with some solutions that improve the way that cars enter the freeway from the Richmond Parkway. Next slide. So here's our schedule. We're aggressively pursuing the design, as you see in the upper green bar. We anticipate advertising for construction by the end of 2022. We are also in the process of improving all of the open road tolling infrastructure that's required to allow vehicle travel without the toll booths in place. And that work is going underway. Hopefully we're all complete in mid-2024. Next slide. And I think I turned it over to you now much more clearly.
Great, thank you, Andy and David, and good evening, everyone. My name is Ann Richmond. I'm the Executive Director of the Transportation Authority of Marin. Thanks for inviting us here. So this part of the presentation summarizes a traffic study that TAM conducted that was really intended to evaluate the potential benefits or drawbacks of a third traffic lane on the upper deck, so westbound, in the morning peak commute periods. And the lane would be created by moving the barrier over to the right side of the bridge. The study also looked at what capital improvements could be needed in Marin County to make that third lane really functional. And just to acknowledge, the study had a pretty narrow focus. So this wasn't intended to look at sort of the whole corridor and identify a whole range of improvements. It was really to look at what would happen in terms of the traffic with this particular scenario of a morning peak period westbound use lane. Next slide, please. So what scenarios were evaluated? We looked at 4 different scenarios. So one was existing conditions as of 2019, so pre-pandemic. We looked at a 2025 baseline condition that assumed that those forward projects that Andy just reviewed had been implemented, that the shoulder stays as a multi-use path, and that there are no other improvements in Marin County. So essentially looking at what happens to traffic a few years out with some improvements, but without that peak period lane. Then we looked at 2 alternatives where that peak period third lane would be in place. So build alternative 1 assumes that the forward projects have been implemented, that there is a peak period use lane on the upper deck, and that a series of capital improvements are implemented on the Marin side, costing about $70 to $90 million. And I'll get to those more in a minute. For build alternative 2, we looked at 2025 also, and this scenario is the same as alternative 1, except that we also construct a pretty sizable new connector that's a freeway to freeway connector on the Marin side that would take people from westbound 580 to southbound 101. So I'll show you that graphic in a moment as well. Next slide, please. So this map shows the approximate locations of those Marin side improvements. So kind of going from right to left or east to west, you have signage on the bridge. You have some widening of the trestle section of the bridge itself. You have widening of the shoulders once you get to 580 on the Marin side, including some new retaining walls. You have to widen an undercrossing of a crossroad called Main Street that goes underneath 580. We'd envision having to close an on-ramp that currently exists at what's called East Francisco Boulevard, and then constructing a new on-ramp further to the west, a new westbound on-ramp location. So pretty sizable improvements, and again, on the order of $70 to $90 million. And all of that would be needed in order to make a third lane continuous and sort of functional and continuing to move traffic. So this slide shows that conceptual westbound 580 to southbound 101 connector. This is an area of San Rafael where the two freeways currently intersect, but there is not actually a connector right now. So currently people have to get off the freeway, get on city streets, and then reconnect with 101 a little bit further to the south. This project would be expected to cost around $300 million. So it's quite significant. There is not currently funding for it. And really it's at an extremely low level of design. It's really just a concept at this point. Next slide, please.
Oh.
We have the next slide.
Sorry, Anne,
That's okay.
my computer stopped working for some reason. Let me
Oh.
try again.
Sure.
Let's try that again. Go ahead.
Great, there we go, thank you. So we looked at where people go when they get off in the bridge in Marin, and we found that about 79% of them who stay on 101 in Marin are heading northbound, so up towards San Rafael, Novato, Sonoma County, and about 21% of the traffic on 101 heads southbound. So there are also folks who do not get on Highway 101 at all. They get off the bridge and exit to local roads, and our model was not able to account for that. So when we talk about these results, it's really for travelers who are continuing on from the bridge onto 101, either north or southbound. Next slide. So these are really the results of the study, and looking at the peak travel times. So starting with those people who are going to northbound 101, what we see is that in 2019, it takes about 35 minutes to get from the 85-80 split in Albany to northbound 101 in Marin. For the 2025 baseline project, which again does not include the peak period lane, but it does include the forward projects, that time stays about, it increases to about 43 minutes for those using general purpose lanes. So not accounting for the improvements that Andy mentioned on transit access with an extended HOV lane. So really what that means is that, we're going to see increased traffic over the next few years. So not too surprising. For alternative one, so with all those other capital improvements in place on the Marin side, as well as that peak period lane, that peak travel time drops down to 32 minutes, so about a 27% savings. For alternative two, which is pretty much the same as alternative one for those heading north, the time again is about 31 minutes. So that it's a pretty significant savings for those headed north. Next slide. So for those headed south, it's a little bit of a different picture. So again, the existing travel time from Albany to 101 is about 48 minutes in the peak. For the 2025 baseline, that time stays roughly the same, slight increase to about 49 minutes. For alternative one, so with all those capital improvements in place, the travel time is actually projected to increase slightly. So it will actually take people a little bit longer. And this is because there is a new bottleneck that would exist at the Sir Francis Drake off-ramp on the Marin side. So folks would have to sort of queue up to get off at that exit to head south. And it really doesn't improve unless you build that direct connector project that I mentioned. But if that were constructed, then you would see a pretty significant savings in travel time down to 32 minutes. Next slide. So another way to look at these results are in terms of how long the backup would be to exit on the Marin side, and specifically to exit at the Sir Francis Drake exit. So the existing backup averages about 0.8 miles, and that's at sort of the peak of the peak at 7:45 in the morning. In 2025, in that no build scenario, that would extend slightly to 1.1 miles, and that would happen a little bit later in the morning, so dropping to about 8:30 a.m. With build alternative 1, which again is that series of capital improvements, that backup is projected to extend pretty much across the whole length of the bridge. And again, this is because of a new bottleneck at Sir Francis Drake Boulevard, with kind of more lanes of traffic trying to exit there compared to what happens now, where the bottleneck is actually a little bit earlier on the bridge. So by the time traffic gets to the Marin side, it's got more of a sort of flow condition. So I know that was a lot of information, and just to summarize the kind of top line points, the peak period use lane on the upper deck would require significant new construction on the Marin County side, on the order of $90 million up to $300 million. Direct access from that East Francisco Boulevard on-ramp that I mentioned would probably not be able to be maintained with this project, and that's likely to be a significant issue for the San Rafael community. Traffic headed to northbound 101 would see a peak hour time savings of about 11 minutes with the project, so with that peak period use lane. However, traffic headed to southbound 101 would actually see a slight increase in their delay of about 3 minutes, and time savings really would only be possible with that direct connector project. The project may end up shifting some of the bottlenecks from the toll plaza area on the east side of the bridge to the Sir Francis Drake Boulevard area on the west side of the bridge. And that's why you see the sort of increase in delay on those heading southbound, in fact, is because of that bottleneck. Additionally, there's a policy issue here that creating another lane on the bridge could lead to what we call induced demand for vehicles on the bridge, which really could be in conflict with the goals of the Forward program that are really looking at ways to incentivize transit and high occupancy vehicle travel on the bridge. So that's just kind of an overriding issue or consideration. And I think that concludes the traffic study portion. So David, is this back to you?
Yes, thank you, Ann. So in May of this year, Marin Municipal Water District approached us about constructing a pipeline across the Richmond-San Rafael Bridge to deliver water from East Bay Mud to Marin Municipal Water District due to the drought. This isn't the first time this has occurred. For those of you who might remember, I think it was 1976, a pipeline was put across the Richmond-San Rafael Bridge. And at that time, it was put up on the upper deck. And of course, things are much more complicated today in 2021 versus 1976. The amount of traffic is way higher today than it was back in 76. We also have the bike and pedestrian path in the same location where the pipe was laid before. The scope of the project includes installing a 24-inch pipe from Point Richmond to the Marin Municipal Water Facility on the Marin side. On the bridge, the pipe is to be installed below the bike path, which is part of a 4-year pilot study started in 2019. Moving west, so starting in the beginning, the project elements are connecting to East Bay Mud main line, installing a pump station, pipe goes in a trench, then it's hung below Schofield Bridge and onto the Richmond-San Rafael Bridge, where, as I mentioned, it'll be hung under the upper deck on the north side of the bridge and onto the Marin Municipal Water District. The Richmond-San Rafael Bridge portion includes some localized strengthening that will be needed, replacing rivets with high-strength bolts at a few locations. Initially, we looked at 4 alternatives, and the advanced planning study for the pipe placement was completed and then used in a joint type selection exercise that included Caltrans, Marin Water, BATA, TAM, and CCTA. And the preferred alternative is to hang the pipe below the upper deck of the Richmond-San Rafael bridge below the bike path. As you can see in the cut section of the bridge there. A formal decision is in its final stages. There will need to be a memo documenting the decision when it's issued. Initially, the Marin Water District cost estimate was for $60 million, and I'm assuming will be refined as the design progresses. The funding is being secured by Marin Municipal Water District. The plan is to start ordering pipe materials very quickly here, complete design by the start of 2022, begin construction by mid-January of 2022, and start receiving and installing pipe by mid-March, with the last pipe shipment by mid-May of 2022, completing construction, testing, and commissioning by the end of June of 2022. And I think in our next presentation, Paul Sellier will be able to give you some more details on that. Next slide.
Actually, it stopped working. Let me try again.
Well, I think that was just the
Yeah, I think that was
summary
the
at that
last
point.
one. So I think we're right here. Go ahead, David.
Yeah, yeah, there you go. So quick summary, I can just mention that the asset management study resulted in no immediate need for a bridge replacement. Bay Area Toll Authority and Caltrans both agree that the bridge is in generally good condition. As discussed by Andy Vermeer, the pilot studies for Richmond access improvement is ongoing with an expected report to be finalized in the summer of 2024. You heard about near-term strategies for the Richmond-San Rafael Forward. And Richmond discussed the westbound third lane study. And then we touched on the Marin Water pipeline issue. And thank you.
Thank you, David. So let me unshare my screen, Madam Chair, and turn it over to Paul to do his presentation. Paul, you want to share your screen and introduce yourself?
Yes, good evening. Paul Sellier with Marin Municipal Water District. I'm the Operations Director with the Water District. And thank you very much for inviting me to make a short presentation this evening. Really interesting work so far, learning tonight from the transportation authorities and the detailed level of work that goes into planning for future needs. So tonight, just very briefly then, our emergency drought project update. And we'll go through our current water supply conditions very quickly, and then a little bit more detail, as David mentioned, on the drought projects, and take a quick look at our next steps. And I know there's been a tremendous amount of energy over this particular project, and we really do appreciate the interest and want to understand and address all of the concerns. So with that, then, the overview of 2021, just to put it in perspective, in California, it's the second driest year since 1895. And the drought, historic in nature, to be sure, the drought of 76, 77, but was not as severe as the one that we're currently in. So what does that mean for Marin Water? You can see rainfall totals here at our Lake Lagunitas with our 2020 water year over here on the right. And for us, it's the you know, in 143 years of history, it's our second driest year. And you can see not only is it just dry, it's very dry compared to the average rainfall of 52 inches per year. That's what we would normally expect. And where does that leave us? So currently we're just a shade below 33% of our total capacity in storage. Normally we would be somewhere closer to 70% of total capacity. So we're less than half of where we would normally be in terms of actual volume. What does the future hold? Well, nobody can really truly tell us what's going to happen. But there is 70 to 80% of La Nina developing, which is helpful for predicting weather conditions in Southern California and in the far north, where you can see the below and above on the screen here. And unfortunately for our section of California around the Bay Area, it's fairly neutral in terms of what La Nina means for us. Although we're very, very thankful for the rain that we're currently receiving. That looks very promising. So I would add that the DWR, Department of Water Resources, has recently come out and identified that because it's been so dry in California, we'll actually need 140% of rainfall to receive average levels of runoff. So our projections then, and what's driving our concerns with respect to water supply, this is our projected reservoir storage levels, with the black line being where we've been. And then this dashed orange line at the bottom representing a 25% average rainfall. This is what would happen in terms of storage in the reservoir. And then the blue dashed line is about 50%. And then the green is our average rainfall. And then the effect of conservation is shown in the solid lines, assuming we achieve a 20% level of conservation. You can see then, if we experience a similar winter to those that we've just had in 2020 and 21, we're going to be in a dire situation. You can see the line crossing into the uncertainty level in the reservoir. And this really represents, we've never operated our reservoir systems below this level. At this level, reservoir water quality can be challenging, and we're just not entirely sure of the hydraulics of the system at this level. So this chart then indicates to us that we are going to need a supplemental water supply in the second half of next year. And make no mistake about it, water is an essential component to our everyday lives. And this threat represents an emergency every bit as serious as something like a hurricane. People running out of water, it's not an easy issue to resolve. So that said, we often get asked, well, why are you in that position? Why haven't you done anything about it? It's easy to forget Marin Water is the oldest special district in California, Special District number 1, founded in 1912. So we have a fair bit of history, and since 1977, we've built Sul-Huli Reservoir, adding 10,000 acre feet to our storage. In 1983, we increased Kent Reservoir, doubling that storage. And then, of course, we've improved our contracts with our neighbors to the north, Sonoma County Water Agency, to secure up to 14,300 acre feet of water there. We have an incredible conservation program where we're spending over $2 million a year on conservation measures. And of course, we have one of the oldest and most creative recycled water programs, pioneering many uses for recycled water, including cooling towers, car washes, commercial laundries, and other indoor uses for recycled water. We've also spent considerable effort in the early 90s and in the mid 2000s studying desalination so that we can understand if that's a viable source for us as a water supply. So back to the current time, right? There are no ideal options for us. We, of course, focused and were early identifying this drought as early as February of 2020, when our board of directors asked us to increase water imports from Sonoma. And our demand management programs kicked in when they asked for voluntary conservation in February of this year. By April of this year, we were in emergency conditions and requiring mandatory conservation measures, one of the first water districts to do so. We've established some creative options with our partners to the north in terms of winter water in the Russian River. This would be water that's above the stream flow requirements that we may be able to get access to without being penalized, because it wouldn't affect the storage levels in Lake Sonoma. I'm sure many of you are aware that Lake Mendocino is practically running dry with less than 10,000 acre-feet of water or so. We have been studying desalination as a temporary facility. This is an extremely complex permitting and operation of a facility like that, and it is extremely limited in capacity. In fact, it just wouldn't meet our needs if the winters were that dry. The emergency intertie project, then, the infrastructure component is progressing well, and there's a lot of work for us still to do on water transfers, and even more work for us to do on addressing concerns over construction-related impacts. The alignment for the project, I think you're all familiar with, proposed to be starting from a point in East Richmond at the corner of Castro and Tewksbury, with a mobile pump station that's manufactured and arrives on site in a soundproof enclosure. That's not to say that it doesn't make any noise, but I understand that the noise level of the pump station is expected to be about 65 decibels, which I understand is less than the freeway noise at this time. That said, we are very interested to know more about the concerns of folks in Point Richmond and what we can do to address those. The route takes us over the bridge under the upper deck. We did, of course, study, as Dave mentioned in some detail, the two options to put the pipeline in the bike path or multi-use path itself and under the upper deck. We ended up choosing under the upper deck, despite a slight increase in cost for that version, because it allows us to preserve the current and future uses of the bridge. And as we've just learned from some of the presentation materials, that could be very important to folks in their commute directions. Taking a closer look then at the this diagram shows sort of the rights of way, and what we're trying to illustrate here is the proposed route going up and joining onto the bike path. And as we follow the bike path pretty much all the way across Schofield, and then where it would actually be on the outboard side of the bike path, and then into Stenmark Drive as we approach the abutment of the bridge. The pink is Caltrans right of way. The sort of cream colored area is the city of Richmond. And noting that we have a number of interested stakeholders and partner agencies in this project, and just a few of them listed here. And we want to make sure that we do understand the concerns for all of these stakeholders. This is just a quick look at this the Schofield crossing area. You can see the pipe in concept would be tucked up under the soffit here, so that we stay out of the bike path and there's no lasting impacts. And over here is an engineering conceptual schematic of what that might look like. The western approach, as soon as we exit the abutment of the bridge as it approaches land, again, we're on the outboard side over the concrete trestle section, so we're not impacting the bike lane, as the two decks of the bridge separate to the concrete trestles. We're staying out of the traveled way altogether. The pipe then goes into the bike lane for a short stretch of a few hundred feet, and then it's into Francisco Boulevard and city streets, where it terminates in a tank, actually two 1 million gallon tanks and a pump station that are situated on a corporation yard owned by the Marin Municipal Water District. The additional piping from those tanks and pumps is to connect the water system to larger pressure zones within our service area. So we've talked a little bit about this already, so I'm just going to skip through this. But in total, we did look at 4 and maybe even 5 in the end. There was under the lower deck, which was ruled out because it might interfere with the navigational channel and clearances requiring Coast Guard permitting. Of course, below the upper deck, which does appear that that's the selected alternative in the type selection, in the multi-use pathway that we talked about. And then we did also look at an option that used the sort of temporary travel lane on the lower deck. And then I think even a fifth was considered but discarded fairly quickly, which was on the outboard side of the bridge altogether. And of course, all of these alternatives were looked at in concert with Caltrans methodologies. And we've seen this also from Dave. In fact, I like Dave's schematic a little better. I may ask to borrow it from him. But this is conceptually what we're looking at. And the idea being that regardless of where we are on the bridge, we're maintaining this traffic envelope throughout the entire bridge. Our goal is to have no impacts to the bridge itself. The sort of roadmap for the project, and this project it's probably a multi-year project, and that's being an understatement. But we're trying to achieve this project in the time frame of 1 year. So we are moving incredibly quickly. And last night, the Marin board made a decision to approve the project, which is really a technicality because we're making some large decisions in order to pre-purchase materials. So the approval of the project allows staff to file the notice of exemption, which allows us then to comply with CEQA so that we can make the decision to pre-purchase the materials for the project. If we do not pre-purchase the materials for the project, then if you think back to the chart on water supply and we have a dry winter, then the project won't be ready to deliver in the time frame that we need it. The remaining steps, and there are probably a few more pieces here, but these are the broad strokes. Sometime in November, the Marin board will, should they choose to, authorize the purchase of water, transfer water. And this is water coming from the Sacramento area that will be wheeled through East Bay Mud facilities. So we're not reducing East Bay Mud's water supply in any way. We'll be, in fact, replacing it in like amounts should the project continue. And of course, the final piece for us will be in December. An agreement with East Bay Mud will formalize the MOU process that's currently we're currently working under. And then sometime after that, depending on permit approvals, we'll be into construction. So our next steps, of course, are continuing to develop the project. And we're going to continue outreach to all the authorities having jurisdiction, excuse me, and of course, stakeholders. And we've made some attempts to do that. And we know we need to improve. We're going to continue focusing on conservation and to develop programs and additional incentives to reduce demands. And that concludes my presentation.
Thank you, Paul. Madam Chair, back to you.
Thank you. Thank you all for the, excuse me, the presentation. Are there any members of the authority board who have questions or comments? I'm not seeing. Yes, Commissioner Nowak.
I just had, there's sort of three different segments here, and I'm trying to understand if any of them are linked or not linked, or they're just separate decision processes. I guess I'm a little confused between the pipeline and the different alternatives. Are there any ties between, or is this just everything that happens to be going on around the Richmond Bridge at this point?
Hisham, or one of the speakers. Oh, there's Hisham.
Maybe I can try to answer this question, but
thank you.
There is a link between all four projects that you've seen. We currently have congestion on the Richmond Santa Fe Bridge. We're trying to address it. We managed to address it in the eastbound direction by adding the third lane, using the shoulder as a third lane. In the westbound direction, there is currently a multi-use path, and in order for the congestion to be reduced, that multi-use path needs to be used more often during commute hours. The idea that it could be replaced by a third lane or placement of a pipeline on that multi-use path, of course, impacts the path and our ability to basically to convince people to do mode shift, to use other modes to cross the bridge. So that's the link between all what you see here. Of course, the study that Caltrans did about the bridge, the structural soundness of the bridge is necessary, because if you add another travel lane on the bridge, you want to know that the bridge can withstand the new loads. So that's the link between all the presentations that you've seen. I hope I clarified it. I'm not sure if Andy or David or
except for the water piece. So the water piece is the water pipeline is separate. To the extent that it's going underneath the upper deck, it's really a separate, it's not tied to the other projects.
That is correct, right?
Okay,
right now,
that's where I was having a little issue on connecting the three of them. Okay, I understand the connection on the first two.
Thank you. Any other questions or follow up on that, Commissioner Nowak?
Well, I guess I did a little bit. I was a little confused on alternative one. Seems to improve the traffic on westbound, but without really doing the big project in Marin, it seems to sort of end up being neutral or worse on time. So I'm trying to understand, unless you're doing the whole big project, that you're not really improving things in total. Is that correct? Did I?
And respond.
Yeah, if I can respond. So that's pretty much right. I mean, you would need significant and expensive capital improvements on the Marin side to really make that third lane function, because otherwise the traffic gets to the end of the bridge and it has nowhere to go. And with alternative one, the folks heading northbound on 101 in Marin would have some improvements, but the folks heading southbound, things would actually get slightly worse for them.
Okay. That was it for my questions.
Thank you. And the next person I saw was Commissioner Arnrich, followed by Commissioner Kelly.
Thank you. Maybe this is a question for David and maybe a little bit from Paul. But I guess given my background, I'm old enough. I watched him build the line in '76, and I watched it sit there for years because I lived in Berkeley and worked in Mill Valley. And I missed that third lane. But we are where we are, and we as CCTA have made commitments in partnership with Richmond and San Rafael as well. But the question I have is, can the proposed water line be installed that it will not force the closure of our pedestrian bike lane? The pathway that you've chosen and the details you've shown, ultimately it's not in the way, but does it in fact require throughout that process to build it to close that lane off? And if so, is there a way to mitigate that, or what is the thought process on that?
Yeah, thank you for the question. So as you saw on the Richmond San Rafael Bridge itself, the pipe will be under the bike path, should be no impacts. The design so far is showing on both sides of the bridge, there are short sections where the pipe would be trenched through the bike path and placed below it. So there would be a time period there where the bike path was being interrupted. So my understanding, and I don't know if Paul's had more conversations about this, the workaround there would be to provide shuttle service on the Richmond side. I believe it's near Chevron Way, if I'm not mistaken. They would then take people up near the toll plaza and allow them to get back on the path. The window for the work on that end. I don't think it's been totally defined yet. But this interruption with the shuttle service is likely to be a couple month stretch. While they're laying pipe, they can do that pretty quickly. And then on the Marin side, I believe it's where it crosses the bike path. There would be some minor interruptions, but they would probably be able to do that work at night, maybe plate it during the day and get through it that way, allowing pedestrian access. And I don't know, Paul, do you have any more comments on that?
Yeah, thanks, Dave. I think that's largely accurate. I would just add that we do plan to work with the bike community, and there is a possibility that the stretch leading up to the toll plaza on the Richmond side could be available on the weekends, for example. But there's a trade-off. As you said, Dave, you can, oftentimes with these projects, sometimes it's just better to get in and get out. And does that mean working weekends as well? So as Dave said, there are still some details to work out, but it's not, I think I've heard numbers on the order of 6 months of construction and closure, and that's not accurate. It's much closer to what David has suggested, maybe 2 to 3 months. And we would want to absolutely make certain that connectivity for those users to all of the other trails remained. And as for the trail itself, the path itself on the bridge, I think that could stay open for most of the project. And we're looking at those details.
Great, thank you. I really appreciate that.
Thank you. And Commissioner Kelly, followed by Commissioner Fedeli.
Yeah, thank you, Chief Chair Geringer. I used to live in Marin in the 70s and would commute over to UC Berkeley. So I remember that pipeline going in. And I had the same kind of question that Commissioner Arnridge did. I would just like to also say, I have great concerns, and I know Mayor Butt has concerns about the bike path getting interrupted. A lot of effort went into to build that. People are using it. I think more and more people are using it all the time. And the possibility of people getting electric bikes, for those of us like myself, we just probably could not commute with the regular bicycle during the week. That will increase usage, and we don't want to interfere with that. So I would just urge you to try to find solutions that interrupt the bike lanes, the multi-use paths, as little as possible. And I think a number of Richmond residents will be really annoyed if this turns into a very long period of interference. So I just wanted to add that comment. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Kelly and Commissioner Fedeli. And if any other board members want to speak or have questions, please.
Yes, I'm here as Mayor Butt's alternate. He couldn't be here. He's got a whole list of concerns that he would have expressed tonight. My wife commutes on the bridge every morning. And so I'm glad about this outreach effort here, but this is really, I think I keep up with stuff. This is a pretty big issue with lots and lots of, as NOAC said, issues connected to this. And it seems to be moving so fast that I'm not sure who's in charge of all this. I mean, I have concerns about what's going to happen with the bike path. What about the emergency issues? Will there be an environmental impact statement? I mean, we all have drought issues. So I'm just here to raise a flag of concern about January. We're about to begin the process in some way. And this is really the first I've heard about it. I don't like to delay if there is an emergency, but I'm just concerned about the speed without due oversight. That's all I have to say right now.
Thank you, Commissioner Fedeli and Commissioner Powers. And I don't see any other commissioner hands up at this moment.
Yes, I'm not an engineer. However, I do recall that when the Bay Bridge was, the bottom was being lowered, or whichever direction it went, there was a hump over the construction area such that cars could continue to drive along the deck. And I just wonder, not to get into any technical issues here, but would it be since the construction is under the upper deck, the area where the bicycles are, would it be possible to kind of tent that area so the bikes could drive over? There may be reasons not to do that. It just occurred to me that that was a solution in a previous generation.
Thank you. Are there any other commissioners, representatives who have comments or questions for our speakers? I did have one question, and it showed up in a number of the public comments that we received in writing ahead of the meeting. And I think, Anne, it might be for you on congestion pricing. You had touched on one of the things of doing the additional lane is it induces more demand and potentially more vehicles. And I may have missed it in reading, but was curious about the studies on congestion pricing at peak times.
I would actually defer to either Andy or David on that as the operator of the bridge.
Yeah, that's a tough question. You know, we do have some authority to do congestion pricing. We certainly evaluate it. We do think price matters in terms of making decisions. But our first goal right now is to make that smooth conversion to open road tolling, where we remove the plazas and then provide priority access to buses and HOVs as our best immediate tool for time savings. We are evaluating sort of pricing the entire system as one of the Plan Bay Area goals, but that's a very long process of just sort of studying. Right now, we don't have any plans to do congestion pricing on the Richmond Bridge, but we do think it would be an effective tool if it were used.
Thank you. So any other questions or comments from commissioners before we go to public comment? Not seeing any virtual or real hands being raised or heads nodding. We will move to public comment, and I do see a lot of hands, and normally I may have asked you to put those down because they're distracting, but you're all here and have them up. But if you want to speak on this item, you will have 3 minutes, and Terry Ann will begin to call on people who have their hands raised, and we will move forward through the public comment. So, and I do want to note that we did receive, and Terry Ann's timer is working. We did receive, I believe by the time of the meeting, 69 public comments were submitted in writing, and those are available on our agenda if you go to the meeting materials. And I know that all of the authority board members had a chance to see those. So Terry Ann, will you please begin to call our public speakers?
Yes, so the first individual doesn't currently have their hand raised, but went to speak earlier. Jordan, I'm going to go ahead and unmute you.
Okay. Hi, Jordan DeStabler again, resident of Point Richmond. I just want to say that I'm in complete agreement with Mayor and Commissioner of the CCTA, Tom Butt, with his very salient concerns concerning the MMWD project, which seems to be being ramrodded through. And I would just like to make a comment regarding what I perceive as a lack of planning on the MMWD's side of things, in that it's been nearly half a century since the drought of the mid-70s. And you missed a great opportunity to install a pipeline proactively when the bridge work was being done for the bicycle pedestrian path, and you kind of blew it. And I'd really like to find out if the MMWD is instilling some pretty good water restrictions on residents of Marin County, namely residents with swimming pools and extensive landscapes. And I would urge you as a water district to, especially given that Marin County is incredibly affluent, that you guys could work in concert with homeowners to develop gray water systems, rainwater sequestration and so forth in a really systematic fashion so that you're not placing burdens on surrounding communities like you are on ours. I have real concerns about the diesel generators to pump the water in my neighborhood. We already are impacted by the Chevron refinery and other industries and the traffic, of course. And when the gentleman said, well, it's only at around 69 decibels, well, that's on top of everything else. And then that's not counting the particulate pollution. And I realize you need to have pumps. I'm not disputing that there is a water emergency, but surely you can locate those generators or those pumps, hopefully on Chevron property. They have a number of parking lots that appear to be underutilized from my rides on the bike path. And I will dearly miss that bike path if it is closed for longer than 2 or 3 months. So anyway, those are my comments. And I'm sorry that you guys weren't more proactive and that, we're having to spend our time debating this at a rather late date. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jordan. Terry Ann, will you invite our next speaker? I see that we have approximately 14 people with raised hands right now. So Terry Ann, thank you for bringing them in.
You're welcome. The next individual is Doug. I'm sorry if I get your last name wrong. Is it Isiger? I'm going to go ahead and unmute you now.
Hi there. Can you hear me all right?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
It's Doug Zessiger. I too am a bike rider. I just spent close to $3,000 on an e-bike, and I intended to ride that most every day. I work in Marin and live in Point Richmond. I have a lot of concerns as well about particulate pollution, about disruption of the bike path. I didn't hear many details about what that pipe will look like on the bike path. There are several parts on the approach to the bridge where it says the pipe will share the bike path. I'd like to know or see a schematic of what that would look like and how that might impinge our using the path. I would also feel more neighborly toward Marin if I were to sell my house someday and there was reciprocity and I could reestablish a residence in Marin if I chose to. But it just feels to me like leftover racist laws in Marin, which has chosen to be somewhat separate from other Bay Area communities over the years. And this feels like just one more instance where you need more water. Oh, of course you'll get it, and you'll ram it through without really consulting us. So it impacts me, it impacts our neighbors here. And I'm not feeling neighborly toward Marin in general, even though I have friends and family who live there and I work there. Thank you. I'll stop there.
Thank you.
Okay, the next speaker is Lisa Johnson. And I will go ahead and unmute you now.
Hi, good evening, commissioners and staff. I'm a Richmond resident speaking in opposition to the MMWD Intertie project as currently proposed. The perception of many Richmond residents is that we often receive the short end of the stick and are treated like second-class citizens when it comes to matters pertaining to Contra Costa County, West County, and Marin County. Richmond residents' voices and our quality of life matter just as much as Marin residents and everyone else's. We deserve and expect equal consideration and respect when proposals are drafted and then considered by the appropriate agency, regardless of socioeconomic status. Recent projects involving the bridge have been perceived as promoting privilege for those residing in Marin County or of higher economic means, with their quality of life and commute needs given significantly higher priority than those residing in Point Richmond or commuting from the East Bay. This has happened when the eastbound direction was modified to 3 lanes while leaving the westbound direction with only 2 lanes and no breakdown lane. This has left us with significantly congested commute traffic as well as increased pollution from idling vehicles. I listened to the presentations tonight, and one significant concern that I have is regarding how the data has been presented for incidents. I'm a scientist, and this data needs to be normalized based on the normal number of vehicles, especially given the precipitous drop in commute traffic in 2020 and first half of 2021 associated with the pandemic. Thus, I would respectfully request that these data sets be renormalized and examined at a future public meeting. Without this data normalization, informed future decisions can simply not be made. It would also be nice to see a slideshow showing a direct cost and travel comparison in times to the improvements that were done in the eastbound direction in today's dollars versus those that would occur with the westbound models. We need to see this direct comparison to know what type of equity is being discussed. Now Marin County is once again proposing to adversely impact the lives of Richmond residents. I called in and spoke at the MMWD meeting last night and was appalled at what I heard. They are prepared to completely disregard our health and quality of life so that they can continue to fill their pools and water their lawns in the rain, while not implementing meaningful and necessary fines. This new project is not about conservation. It is about them continuing to use water at the same rate without being good neighbors or environmental stewards. Their clear actions but muddy proposals do not meet the standards for an emergency project. It is a permanent project designed to augment their water supply. As such, I am respectfully requesting that any project that comes before this commission must have a full EIR, and I echo all of the requirements that Mayor Butt highlighted in his e-forum today. I would also like to ask how and why, if this is only planned to provide up to 8% of their drinking water, and we all know it is permanent, then why aren't they seeking other alternatives like permanent desalination? Thank you.
Thank you. And our next speaker.
The next individual is Brian Coyne, and I will go ahead and unmute you now.
Hi there.
Welcome,
Thank you.
Brian.
Thank you very much for giving me the chance to speak here, and thank you to all the speakers for your updates. So my name is Brian Coyne. I live in San Francisco, and I've joined the meeting tonight to help ensure that the interests and concerns of the Bay Area's bicyclists are heard and taken account of in the planning for the construction and operation of the pipeline project, as well as in any longer term planning for the bridge. So first and most importantly, bicyclists and pedestrians are legitimate bridge users equal to drivers and must be treated as such, again, both in the short-term planning for the pipeline and in the longer-term discussion of the bridge's future. So for example, anytime we look at projections for delays or commute times across the bridge 5, 10, 20 years out, well, it seems to me there really ought to be an inclusion of delays for bicyclists and pedestrians as well. So one of the options that included turning the bike path into a car lane, well, we heard a lot of data about how that would save drivers 10 minutes or so, but how would that impact bicyclist trips? It would delay bicyclists by 5 hours, and that ought to be included in all of this data and taken into account as well. So more immediately, we need to ensure that bicyclists and pedestrians have access to the bridge and the approaches to the bridge throughout the construction of the pipeline project. I really appreciated Commissioner Powers's statement before that this is a challenging engineering problem, but I agree with Commissioner Powers that this is a problem that has an engineering solution. If it were car access, a solution would be found to ensure that access could be maintained throughout the duration of the construction and operation of the project. And I urge you to find a way to solve this problem and ensure that bicyclists and pedestrians have access throughout the project. This is consistent with the policies of all the agencies here. It's consistent with state law, and I believe it is the right thing to do for this project. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian.
Okay, thank you. The next individual is Claudia, and I'm going to go ahead and unmute you now.
Hi, my name is Claudia Citroen. I'm a Richmond resident. I'd like to address 3 different issues. The first one is I'm a morning commuter, and the morning commute the bridge can take up to 1 hour because there's no breakdown shoulder. It is not that there's no access for emergency vehicle. There is no access for broken down vehicles to move away. We need that breakdown shoulder. I do not understand why bicyclists cannot take public transportation, which you encourage and is increased. Why cannot these, during the week, these 50 bicyclists load their bike onto the public transportation and like anyone else use public transportation? We need the breakdown lane. The second issue is Marine Water Board, they don't use numbers, and it really annoys me. At this point, they try to get this pipe approved without an environmental impact review. They try to have the main staging area within a protected water area because there's an osprey nest just across the bridge. This is unacceptable. This is egregious. At this point, Marin has not imposed draconic mandatory restrictions. This is unacceptable to pretend that they're in an emergency. Today's presentation failed to present the urgency because it failed to present the efforts they have done to conserve water. To have a pipeline built which only brings 8% of water and only 40% of this 8% are even secured is unacceptable without an EIR. The city of Richmond has not been included. The placement of the pumps have not been decided. This project is being pushed through, and I hope you delay the project, and I hope you insist on an EIR for this project. I also hope you understand that commuters need the breakdown lane. This has been an issue. If Marin, 90% of the traffic in the morning is vendors and contractors. It's not leisure drivers. It's not moms and pops. They cannot go on a bicycle. They cannot use public transportation. And so we need to move on the other way and get cyclists to understand that they need to use public transportation to get across the bridge so the bike path can be maintained and the whole traffic situation resolves. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Claudia.
The next speaker is Warren Wells. I'm going to go ahead and unmute you now.
Welcome.
Good evening, commissioners and staff. My name is Warren Wells, and I'm the Policy and Plan Director for the Marin County Bicycle Coalition. We fully recognize the importance of the emergency intertie and understand the fact that such a project will entail some level of disruption on the bridge, being a highly constrained right-of-way. To this end, we were pleased to learn of the plan to place the pipeline below the upper deck rather than within the existing multi-use pathway. But as stakeholders of the active transportation network, we were concerned to see the alignment of the eastern reach of the pipeline is currently proposed to be buried within the San Francisco Bay Trail between Point Richmond and Stenmark Drive at the bridge abutment. As you know, this segment of trail represents the only non-motorized access between Richmond and Marin, as well as Point Bellotti Beach and Point San Pablo Harbor. And while some disruption is no doubt unavoidable, we would like to second the suggestion made here and also by Richmond Mayor Tom Butt that the pipeline be installed adjacent to the Bay Trail rather than beneath it. To echo the comments made by Commissioners Arnerich and Kelly, and to ensure that people can continue to cross the bay without having to own a motor vehicle or waiting for the bus, which can come, every hour, we're urging the project team to take all feasible steps to maintain access to the bridge path and its approaches, and avoid any multi-week, or has been suggested today, multi-month closures. In the interest of full disclosure, I'm saying this both in my professional capacity and as a Corliss resident of the East Bay who commutes to Marin via the Richmond-San Rafael Bridge by bicycle. While many riders of the bridge may indeed be recreational, I can assure the commissioners that is by no means universal. I recognize that this is a challenging project on a constrained timeline, but we're urging the Water District to recognize the critical importance of our multimodal transportation network and not simply use it as the default construction zone because it is the path of least resistance. Thank you very much for your time and consideration tonight.
Thank you.
The next public speaker is Dave Campbell, and I will go ahead and unmute you now.
Good evening, commissioners. This is Dave Campbell, your advocacy director with Bike East Bay, here in support of keeping the bike path open on the bridge and asking for your support very clearly for a couple of things. One, our good friend and to meet with stakeholders but no one from TAM or the Water District has picked up the phone and given Bike East Bay a call to discuss this issue. So that's request one, is direct TAM and the Water District to pick up the phone and give Bike East Bay a call and start talking about this. You'll probably find you get fewer people calling into your meetings if we can work things out in advance and say something like, we've already worked this out with TAM and the Water District. No need to call in and disrupt the CCTA board meetings so that they can discuss things more important. Two, please direct the Water District to keep the bike path open at all hours, at least during the day and evenings. Whatever work they need to do that disrupts the path, do it during late night, early morning hours. And then on the congestion pricing issue, thank you for the question from the commissioner on that. And thank you to Andy Vermeer for your rather frank response. We have seen from MTC, congestion pricing solves the problem and gets everyone into and out of Marin County much faster than any of these other $400 million projects will do. So that's my third ask, is direct TAM to fully study, and MTC to fully study and analyze congestion pricing before coming back to this body with any proposal to disrupt bike paths on the bridge. I also want to say it's a pleasure that finally this conversation is happening here on our home turf in Contra Costa County. We know how to do responsible transportation planning over here, and I hope you will share with your colleagues in Marin County how we do that here in Contra Costa County. So those are my asks for you. Pick up the phone and give Bike East Bay a call. Keep that path open at all hours, and fully study congestion pricing so that we can all spend time on more important issues. Thank you.
Thank you, Dave.
Okay, the next speaker is Max, and I will go ahead and unmute you now.
Hello, hi, this is Max Davis. I'm an Alameda County resident. I wanted to comment also on the westbound third lane study. I don't think I need to talk and go on a big rant about climate change, but it's hard not to bring it up when there are tons of studies showing that if you add more lanes, more people drive, and you end up right back in the same situation you were before with lots of congestion. But now there's more people and more cars crossing a bridge, causing more pollution, just bringing us closer to this apocalypse we're approaching with climate change. So to me, the choice is obvious: to keep the existing multi-use path and not spend the money on changes, and instead start talking about mode share changes and congestion pricing. I think that's the obvious path forward here is congestion pricing, not spending lots of money, adding more cars to the road, and continuing to light our climate on fire with more cars. So that's all I've got. Thank you so much for the presentation.
Thank you.
The next speaker is Allison Knockman. Sorry if I got that wrong. I'm going to go ahead and unmute you now.
Hi, good evening. Oh,
welcome.
1 second. So I am a resident of Point Richmond, and I actually live right on Tewksbury. Very, very close to where this proposed pump station is. I'm actually really upset and just learned about any of the plan for the pipeline last night. I'm really upset because there's been no communication with our community. We are in constant, we're inundated by noise pollution from the highway, pollution from, the air from all the factories, all of the industry around. We have children, we have a child with asthma who I'm sure is all related to the pollution around. So that's just a little background. So when I learned about this, that there was going to be possibly construction right in front of our house, and we haven't been told anything about this. no letters, no communication, nothing. It leaves, it leaves you feeling very upset and angry. My husband was in the meeting last night and he told me that somebody asked one of the people in charge over Marin, why was there no communication? And there was no answer to that question. How come no one had reached out to anybody who lives right here where all this construction would be happening? It's really insulting. One of my main questions is why, if they're going to build a pump station right here in a residential area, why wouldn't they do it across the other side of the highway where there aren't residents? Is there no creative solution? And I am not an engineer. I am an audiologist. And I actually understand what 65 decibels from the noise means from the pump station. Like the other person who called in, we already have a ton of noise from the highway. We have to keep our doors closed. We can't even be out front in our yard because it's noisy. So maybe that's not a big deal for anyone else who doesn't live here. I'm all for sharing water. I know we're in a climate crisis and we do everything in our home to make sure that we are being careful about our water usage. But we shouldn't have to suffer because of the lack of water conservation anywhere else. And we want to have good communication. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Allison.
The next speaker is Arvi Srinivasan. Again, apologies if I butchered that. I'm going to go ahead and unmute you now.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Arvi Srinivasan. I'm an Alameda County resident. I'm also a daily bike commuter. And I'm here to ask that we avoid interrupting access to the bike path while this pipeline is built. I think we saw that cool map earlier. This is a historic drought, but the historic drought that's triggering the need for the pipeline, the reason that we're here, we all know it's part of the climate crisis. I believe that probably most people in this room recognize that that's real and that it's a really pressing threat. And I just think it's ironic that we would take a short-term mitigation step to the climate crisis like this pipeline, while at the same time taking a long-term step backwards, namely undermining non-car transportation infrastructure. We know it's like a confirmed, irrefutable fact that car travel is a huge contributor to climate change. And I think that the natural objection here, or the reason why we might brush this aside, is that, well, the bike path isn't a transportation solution by itself. And I want to recognize that that's true. It's not sufficient, but it is absolutely necessary, this like key arterial link. And I just want to say that we can't build the future that we need if we rip out every necessary piece because that piece isn't individually sufficient. Mr. Hisham Noemi spoke earlier, and excuse me if I mispronounced your name, about the need for mode share shift away from cars. And Mayor Chris Kelly talked about how e-bikes make this mode shift more feasible for more people than ever before. But interrupting access for a long period, like 6 months, just making it uncertain, massively undermines the mode shift that we need to see. I think that car travel is the dominant mode today, and so it's easy to be like, this is the only option, and to think that any compromise is crazy, or to think that like, well, the cars and trucks and contractors going across in vehicles, that's necessary, but bikes are not necessary. But that attitude and that reality, that's shaped by the choices that we make and that we're all jointly making here now. And we have to make infrastructure choices that allow for other travel modes if we're going to survive the climate crisis that's like threatening literally everyone in this call right now. I think that the hard thing is that it isn't one big choice that we're going to make. It's going to be the accumulation of many, many choices. But this right now is obviously one of those choices. So I just beg the powers that be to do the right thing on this, please. Please do not interrupt access to the bike path during this construction. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Arvi. And it looks like we have, 4 more hands raised. And so if you do want to speak, if you would please raise your hand now so that Terry Ann has a sense and we can get you on camera.
The next public speaker is Bruce Bayard. And I'm going to go ahead and unmute you now.
Commissioners, my name is Bruce Bayard. I'm the chair of TRAC, the Trails for Richmond Action Committee. TRAC would like to ask Marin Water District to go back to the drawing boards, working with Caltrans, and find a way to avoid shutting down the 5.5 miles of San Francisco Bay Trail that intersects this project. There's 4.5 miles on the bridge. Let's find a way to avoid shutting down the western end by 2 to 3 months. Car shuttles don't work. Nobody's going to want to do that. You wouldn't shut it down the freeway for 2 or 3 months. Find a way to get around building part of the pipeline in the trail at that end of the bridge. There's another 1.2 miles of Bay Trail between the bridge and Castro Street in Richmond. The current project proposes to install a big pump station with a pipeline following buried in the Bay Trail from Castro Street toward the bridge. This makes no sense. There are very feasible alternatives available. This stretch of 1.1 miles of Bay Trail is the only way people can bicycle or walk to the city's Point Melati Beach Park. It's the only way people bicycle and walk to the Richmond San Rafael Bridge Trail. It's the only way people can bicycle and walk to the Point San Pablo Harbor with its popular Black Pirate barbecue restaurant. There are good alternatives to building the trail in the pipeline in the trail from Castro Street to the bridge. First, East Bay Mud has a 12-inch pipeline right almost at the bridge at the Tewksbury exit from I-580. Why not use that? That pipeline is to supply Point Melati, but no water is going to be needed at Point Melati for development for 5 to 10 years. The other option is to move it across the freeway from the current proposed Castro and Tewksbury location. The proposed location is right at a residential and commercial district. It makes no sense to put pumps, emergency compressors at that location with the noise, the stink when the compressors are running, and the air pollution. Simply move it across the freeway to the north in the industrial area, run the pipeline along Chevron Way on Caltrans, the city of Richmond, right away. Either of these two alternatives, running along Chevron Way or hooking into the 12-inch East Bay Mud at Stenmark Drive exit to I-580 should work. So let's go that way. Let's not shut down 5.5 miles of Bay Trail. Nevada has invested an immense amount of money in designing and building this splendid section trail. Let's make it work. Let's not discourage people from using it. Thank you.
Thank you, Bruce. And just as an update, right now I showed a speaker named Jane as the last speaker. If you want to speak on this item, please raise your hand now, or we will have Jane be our last speaker. Thanks for calling the next speaker, Terry Ann.
Next speaker is Maureen Gaffney, and I'll go ahead and unmute you now.
Great, thank you so much. My name is Maureen Gaffney, and I just want to say I'm a huge fan of the San Francisco Bay Trail, a planned 500-mile trail around the entire San Francisco Bay. And it occurs to me that climate change and drought, probably climate change driven drought, are the issues that are driving this conversation. And we all know that the transportation sector is the largest contributor to greenhouse gas emissions. So we need to be, I just really agree with a lot of the comments that have been made by all of the speakers that have preceded me and several of the board members as well. We need to be pursuing and preserving and protecting any and all means of active transportation, bicycling, walking, e-biking, as a solution to this issue that does indeed affect us all. So I'm happy to hear that interruptions to the Bay Trail are being taken seriously, and I appreciate that perhaps the word on the street that it was going to be a potential closure of 6 months may have been overstated. I hope so, and I hope that there will be no disruptions to the bicycle pedestrian path on the Richmond San Rafael Bridge that so many people have worked so hard to get that path on the bridge for so many years. It's still just part of a 4-year pilot program. We really need to see if we can make a mode shift, and I think it's working. And I think we need to, again, as another commenter said, not provide any reason for any person to be discouraged from getting out of their car and trying this as a commute option. So please do indeed take any and all actions necessary to keep this critical connection between Marin and Contra Costa counties open for everyone during this entire project. And those are my comments, and thank you for your thoughtful consideration of this issue.
Thank you. Thank you, Maureen.
Okay, the next speaker is Tom Yamaguchi. I'm going to go ahead and mute you now.
Thank you. Thank you, board members, for allowing me to speak. My name is Tom Yamaguchi. I am a resident of Berkeley. I am a bicyclist, and I do not own a car, haven't for a long time. I have used the Richmond-San Rafael trail and intend to keep using it. I hope that it could continues to exist without any disruptions. And because I also remember the times when I had to rely on public transportation, the Richmond or the El Cerrito del Norte bus that ran over to San Rafael, having to get there early so make sure that I could get a place for my bicycle because capacity as far as bike racks go are very, very limited. So Claudia, we do have used the public transit. We need that bike lane. I'd like to also just sort of like thank Max, Arvi, and Maureen for bringing up the climate crisis that is certainly connected with this horrible drought that we're experiencing now. So I know that I will defer to them what they say. Just agree totally with what they say. We need to act on climate, and we need to get more capacity for bikes on our local roads. As commissioners have mentioned, e-bikes are becoming more and more popular, more and more affordable. There will be an increase of that, and so these lanes, this infrastructure is going to become even more important in the future. So thank you very much for listening.
Thank you. Thanks, Tom.
Okay, the next speaker is Nick Pilch. I'm going to go ahead and mute you now.
Thank you. This is Nick Pilch from Albany, a co-founder of Albany Strollers and Rollers. As far as the water goes, conservation with real penalties must be the first priority. All optional usages such as pools and watering of lawns and plantings must be banned. It does seem there might not have been very good foresight in terms of providing for the future water needs or usage in Marin County. Regardless, you may have an emergency now. You must do everything you can to try to prevent closure of the path, including reevaluating the placement of the pipeline. If you were to completely cut off car access for 2 to 3 months, you'd not be able to do it. The outcry would be off the charts. So why is it okay to do this for pedestrians and cyclists? You must provide complete streets by law and provide for all modes. Okay, so if you grant that even if you grant that the pathway is new and a pilot, then if the path is somehow closed, you must extend the pilot by at least 6 months. If you close it even for a short time, the repercussions would be huge. Many might change their habits and start driving permanently, and many might assume that the path has gone away. In order to mitigate this, a significant extension of the pilot must be done in the hopefully unlikely event that the pathway is closed. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks, Nick.
The next speaker is Brianna Stubbs, and I'm unmuting you right now.
Hello, everyone. Thank you very much for providing us with opportunities to comment. I'd like to say firstly that I completely agree with much of what's been said by the committee members and all the speakers that have gone before. Especially want to echo the comments just made by Nick that I feel that any closure of the bike path is going to dramatically affect the results of the pilot. Should consider extending the pilot or accounting for the results of the pilot are interpreted. While I was initially pleased to see that this proposed pipeline would be placed under the upper deck roadway and not in the path, this decision, when combined with the planned closure for installation, is a lot more insidious than it first appears. If the 2-foot wide pipeline was constructed on the multi-use path, it would ultimately prevent the re-addition of the third auto lane for the foreseeable future. Expanding the upper deck to 3 traffic lanes during peak hours is clearly a goal of many officials in Marin, and by opting to pursue a solution that leaves the roadway clear but imposes a closure on non-drivers and prevents the adoption of alternative modes of transit, Marin is actively sabotaging the long-term success of this multi-use pathway, whilst ensuring the potential for reintroduction of the third auto lane in the future. It is ironic that in order to meet the water needs of a county currently experiencing an extreme drought, the current best option is to block low carbon transit and force commuters back into cars, changing habits that we've worked hard to break. Finally, the fact that the path will be excavated and prevent bridge access, and that's actually occurring in Richmond and not in Marin. I should have said up front that I'm a resident of Richmond and my husband commutes 6 days a week via bike on the bridge. For this project, which is designed to alleviate resource mismanagement, Marin is overall emblematic of Marin's systemic aversion to forward-thinking local development. Efforts must be made to maintain the pedestrian and bicycle access and further improve the infrastructure in Marin to incentivize the use of the multi-use path. Thank you for your time, and I hope to see action change and ultimately the opening and that the multi-use path remains open. Thank you.
Thank you, Brianna.
The next speaker is Corey Wallow, and I'm going to go ahead and unmute you now.
Great, thank you. Hi there, my name is Corey Wallow. I'm a San Francisco resident and bike commuter, and I'm speaking in support of uninterrupted access to the bike path during construction of this water line. I like earlier speakers find irony in the suggestion that we expand car lanes to build a water line necessary to help address our significant drought. Moreover, we've heard suggestions that cyclists should take the brunt of the inconvenience while car users are coddled. I'd love for us to see the root cause for this proposal as an issue that we all need to respond to, regardless of transportation mode. I'm also sympathetic to the complexity of this project, but alternative transportation infrastructure can no longer be the first thing on the chopping block at every opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, the next speaker is Jane. I will be unmuting you now.
Thank you. I do appreciate that there's a lot of energy and passion that's been expressed this evening by bikers, by people who use the bike commute lane. And I understand their concern. I would like to point out that the interruption, if there is one, we're talking about for bike travel is, a couple of months was mentioned tonight. And I do understand that the ramifications would be considerable. People would change their habits. But I'm disappointed that there hasn't been more discussion of the pumping station at the bottom of Tewksbury, because that is going to be a permanent installation that will impact the lives of the people here. And so I noted in all of the presentations that a discussion of the very careful assessment and consideration of different alternatives. I don't recall hearing any consideration of an alternative placement of the pumping station across on the other side of the highway, closer to Chevron or maybe on Chevron's property. And I think, I thought that was that was significant in its omission, or maybe I did miss it. The last thing I wanted to say was that in consideration of installing a third traffic lane on the westbound side, and I'm not proposing that, one of the arguments against that was a concern that it might lead to induced increase traffic. And I wondered if that had been a consideration when you opened up the third lane going eastbound. It feels to me, living in Point Richmond, and I should have prefaced my remarks with that, that, and I'm not, that this is a sentiment that's been expressed several times this evening, that people over here in Richmond wind up getting the short end of the stick or having just money talks, and Marin gets its way, has a lot of sway, and can pretty much push these projects through. They've already given their approval, and they're already buying equipment. So that's all I wanted to say, but thank you.
Thank you, Jane. And Terry, and I'm confirming that's our last speaker.
That is the last for verbal comments. I do have some written public comment that I need to read as well. I did receive 5 additional public comments. 2 of them spoke this evening, Brian Coyne and Alicia Johnson, so I won't be rereading them. But there is 3 additional public comments. One is Patrick Phelan, and I'll go ahead and read his public comment. Lindsay, sorry you took down the slide. If you wouldn't mind putting it back up so we can do the 3 minutes for each of these 3 written public comments.
Give me a moment.
This one's actually pretty short. I'm pretty sure it's under 3 minutes. So I'll go ahead and start with this one. Dear CCTA, as a City of Richmond employee, Bike East Bay member, and user of the Richmond San Rafael Bridge bike ped path, I urge you to find a different solution than building the Marin water pipeline underneath the bike ped approach to the bridge. Though we are happy that the water pipe will be built underneath the deck of the bridge and not in the bike ped path, closing the approach path will effectively cut off usage of the bridge by walkers and bikers. In addition, this will cut off active transportation access to the Point Malati Peninsula. There are no alternative routes for either of these destinations unless planners propose to reintroduce bicycles to the shoulder of the freeway where people have been killed. Again, that was Patrick Phelan, and I'll go ahead and move to the next one. These are all 3 pretty short, so go ahead and continue. The next one is Tom Wilking. Dear gentle person, this email is to request that the Richmond San Rafael Bridge bike path remain in place and open during any pipeline construction. I use this bike path often, and I, as an East Bay resident, I fail to see how or why we are in a position to provide water to Marin County, and you encourage implementing congestion pricing prior to replacing the bike path with a 3rd westbound vehicle lane to the bridge. Congestion pricing seems far more likely to work on reduced congestion. Adding a lane would simply shift congestion to the end of that lane. Thank you for your attention to these issues. And the 3rd one is from George Fisher. Once a water main is installed under the 3rd westbound lane of the San Rafael Bridge, the lane should be repurposed for general vehicles as opposed to the great expense of reinstalling barriers to be used only by a handful of walkers and cyclists. The persistent weight of new water lines along with the concrete will add undue strain to the bridge's structure. The path will never move as many people through the corridor as a 3rd auto lane. The barriers do not allow for use of the 3rd lane as a shoulder, making it dangerous for anyone involved in an accident or breakdown. The bridge opened with 3 vehicle lanes on each level in 1956 and should be restored to such a configuration. That does include our verbal and written public comments.
Thank you, Terry Ann. Okay, so first of all, thank you very much to all of the public speakers, and thank you to our presenters. Are there any additional comments from commissioners before we close this item or questions? Okay, I do not see anyone, so we will move on to the next item on our agenda, which is the consent calendar. And are there any changes or comments from the board? Does anybody want to pull an item? Okay, not seeing anyone again.
I'll move I'll move consent.
Okay.
I'll second.
Okay, so we have a motion by Commissioner Nowak and a second by Commissioner Glover, I think. But first, Terry Ann, did we receive any written public comments on any consent agenda items?
No written public comments.
Okay, and are there any members of the public who would like to speak to an item on the consent calendar? And not seeing anyone, we will bring it back. And Terry Ann, will you please conduct the roll call vote?
Yes, Commissioner Arnrich,
Yes.
Commissioner Fideli,
Yes.
Commissioner Glover,
Yes.
Commissioner Haskew,
Yes.
Commissioner Hudson. I believe he said he had to leave early. Commissioner Mitchell,
Yes.
Commissioner Nowak, I think she froze. I'll come back. Commissioner Thorpe.
Aye.
Thank you. Commissioner White, I believe, is still absent. Vice Chair Kelly,
Yes.
Chair Geringer,
Aye.
Commissioner Nowak,
Looks like she is still frozen.
She's frozen. She's frozen.
did I hear her? Oh, Commissioner Nowak, you're back.
Yeah, sorry, everybody froze there for a second, including me.
Thawed out. She
Yes.
thawed out.
Thank you. You were voting yes?
Yes, yes, sorry.
Thank you. Motion passes unanimously with Commissioner Hudson and Commissioner White absent.
Great, thank you. We'll now move on to our regular agenda items. And the first item will be for the Administration and Projects Committee. And it's an informational item in our continuing our series presented by Stephanie Hu to provide a project status update on the Innovate 680 program and project. And Stephanie, welcome back. And thank you in advance for the presentation.
Thank you. And confirming you can see the slide?
Yes.
Slide and you can hear me fine. Great.
Yes, on both.
Great. Good evening, Chair and Commissioners. My name is Stephanie Hu again, Director of Project at CCTA and the Program Manager for Innovate 680. And happy to be back today with part 5 of our Innovate 680 mini series. And we took a 2-month break due to our being dark in August and also skipping September because we had a heavy agenda. But just a summary, we've heard 4 briefings so far. First, the program overview, then the behavioral science study, the program concept of operations, and then the coordinated adaptive ramp meeting. And through that, staff has heard comments that are these briefings that we need projects that are not just freeway focused or capacity increasing. So I'm happy to spend some time this evening to highlight projects that are transit focused and first mile, last mile focused. And that will really encourage our users to get out of their single occupancy vehicles to create more shift for our program goals and also to reduce VMT. So we'll be looking at a simulation showing a transit rider's experience while commuting from San Ramon to the Walnut Creek BART station. The simulation will highlight the transit and first mile, last mile elements of Innovate 680. And I'll be pausing throughout the simulation to highlight project details. What you see on the screen right now is a conceptual layout of a shared mobility hub at the Bollinger Canyon Park and Ride. Shared Mobility Hub is one of the projects in the Innovate 680 program, which I will talk more in a moment. You can see a shared autonomous shuttle pulling into the mobility hub. Here, the transit rider is inside the autonomous shuttle, and one of the projects in the Innovate 680 program is the Automated Driving System, or ADS project. The ADS project is a 4-year pilot program with 3 demonstration projects that is funded by a $7.5 million US DOT grant to assess the safety and implementation of shared autonomous vehicles. The first project is the Rossmore Senior Community in Walnut Creek, where autonomous shuttles can provide seniors access to facility inside the senior community. The second project is the County Hospital at Martinez. This demo project will provide on-demand, door-to-door autonomous shuttle services to take people to their medical appointments. And then lastly, the third project is the personal mobility on I-680. The project will prepare the corridor for the future of connected autonomous vehicle with installation of new and upgraded vehicle to infrastructure and vehicle to vehicle technologies to accommodate connected autonomous vehicle technology and implementation of innovative operational strategies. The data gathered will be used to develop safety performance measures for planning and implementation of future SAV projects. The project team currently is working on concept of operations and including collaborating with vendors on user cases. The ACV will drop the transit rider off at the Shell Mobility Hub.
Welcome to the Bollinger Canyon Transit Station.
When the transit user gets off the shuttle, she will find wayfinding and transit info on real-time displays. There may be amenities like a coffee shop or bike lockers and Wi-Fi. There may be a pickup and drop-off area for rideshare like Uber and Lyft. All of these amenities will make transit more attractive to create mode shift for the corridor. And because the transit user used the Innovate 680 mobile app to plan her trip, she doesn't wait very long for the bus to arrive to take her to the Walnut Creek BART station. And we'll talk more about the mobility of the mobile app later in the presentation. So a little bit more on the mobility hubs. The program proposes to implement these Shell mobility hubs at strategic places, at park and ride lots and transit centers to provide commuters with access to multimodal transportation and first mile and last mile options. The Mobility Hub project is currently in the feasibility study phase. The project team has completed a Mobility Hub toolkit, which is essentially a catalog of mobility features and services to be used when designing a mobility hub. The team presented to the TAC last week on this toolkit and also reviewed typologies of hub and potential hub locations. Also, as a result of an express bus study conducted by the Livermore-Amador Valley Transit Authority, or LAFTA, County Connection and LAFTA are partnering to develop a one-seat express bus ride between Martinez Amtrak Station and the Dublin Pleasanton BART Station, extending to the A's Pleasanton Station during peak periods. The mobility hubs located at Bollinger Canyon Road, Walnut Creek BART Station, and the Martinez Amtrak Station will help support this one-seat ride express bus service. Staff is taking the lead and working on a funding application for the Transit and Intercity Rail Capital Program, or TIRCP, with LAFTA and County Connection to fund this one-seat ride. The funding request will cover hydrogen fueling station, hydrogen buses, and shared mobility hubs. Both the shared mobility hub and the one-seat ride service have VMT reduction potential that could be used to be mitigation strategies to offset the VMT increase by the Northbound Express Link project that's also in the program. So returning to the bus, it will leave the mobility hub and get onto Northbound 680, taking the transit user to her next transit connection at the Walnut Creek BART station. The bus will take the part-time transit lane shown in red because of the congestion on the freeway. Part-time transit lane project is to enable buses to travel on the shoulder to bypass heavy congestion when speed on the general purpose lanes drops below 35 miles per hour, limited to a speed differential of 15 miles per hour between the part-time transit lane and the adjacent lane. We're looking to implement part-time transit lane on Interstate 680 between Bollinger Canyon Road and Ignacio Valley Road. Staff is working with Assembly Member Mullen and the California Transit Association on the part-time transit lane legislation for the next legislative cycle. We've been coordinating with CHP, DMV, Caltrans, and CalSTA on this effort, and the legislation will allow statewide part-time transit lane implementation. In partnership with Caltrans and CHP, we will use Momentum Station as a proving ground for the technology and training to demonstrate that part-time transit lane can be implemented safely in ensuring safety for all road users. We are also staying on top of guidance being developed by Caltrans for part-time transit lane. The TIRCP application that I talked about earlier for the one-seat ride service will also include a funding request to implement part-time transit lane. And the current status right now of the project is that staff has restarted the project initiation document phase with Caltrans. This is after we stopped work for about a year to conserve Measure J funds while we work on legislation and also wait for Caltrans guidance on part-time transit lane. So the bus continues and arrives at the Walnut Creek BART station and the bus facility, where the transit user gets off the bus and she sees familiar shared mobility hub amenities such as display and wayfinding. And here she has completed this leg of her trip and she can check her mobile app to get more details on her next transit connection. And then this brings us to the last project, which is the Mobility on Demand, Mobility as a Service, or MODMAS project. The MODMAS project will provide an enhanced mobile app to help commuters make informed choices or decisions about mode choice, travel time, and cost of trip. The authority received $8 million from the Advanced Transportation and Congestion Management Technologies Deployment Grant for the project. The team has been developing components of the mobile app that will provide various mobility options. The team is currently working on the user interface design and working with vendors involving car share, micromobility, and rewards incentive programs. You may recall at the previous briefing on travel behavioral study and the survey that out of 1,500 people who took the survey, 1,000 had agreed to be contacted in the future for additional research. Well, 20 people from this group helped us with testing a mock-up of the app. Users were asked to navigate through 3 tasks to test usability and intuitiveness of the mock-up app. After each task, the testers were asked to provide feedback. The team got feedback on things like usability, graphics, what can be improved, and what they liked about the app. Here are some things that the tester said about what they liked. The app tester commented that they can see themselves using the app from a fairly often basis to a very often basis for various trip types like going to work, recreational trips, shopping, and connecting to park. As the other projects discussed tonight or earlier today in my presentation, the ModMOS project supports the program goals of MoShift, encouraging modes of travel beyond the single occupancy vehicle. And the tentative schedule for this live beta testing of the app is scheduled for August 2022. And with that, I'll be happy to answer any questions. Let me take down the presentation.
Thank you, Stephanie. And you answered my question, which was timeline and when we might expect some of these things to come on board. So are there any commissioners or representatives who have a question or comment on Stephanie's presentation? Sorry, Vice Chair Kelly.
Yes, thank you, Stephanie, for the presentation. I love the simulation and the inclusion of the app. I mean, this will be a really great educational tool that will teach people how to use the mobility hubs and give them the different options, show that this is just really possible. So thank you very much. And I hope we roll this out to a whole bunch of people. I'm very excited to see the autonomous vehicle, the Ollie, in operation eventually at Rossmore. I think that will be really exciting. So thank you.
Yep, thank you, Vice Chair Kelly. Anyone else have a question or comment on this item? So we'll move on to, did we receive any written comment, Terry Ann?
No written public comments.
Thank you. If there are any members of the public who would like to speak to this item, please raise your hand. And I'm
no
not
hands
seeing
raised.
any hands come up. And so, well, thank you again, Stephanie. And will we have another update in our series at our upcoming meeting?
Yeah, we have one more coming up next month.
Okay, great. Thank you. Thank you very much. Okay, we will move on now to the next item on the agenda, which will be an action item, and it's going to be presented by Lindsay Willis to adopt a strategic communications roadmap and budget, and to issue a request for qualifications for strategic communications and marketing services. And Lindsay, take it away.
Good evening, commissioners. I'm working on trying to share my screen at the moment, and it's not working. So in which case you will, oh, there we go.
There you go.
I was gonna say you almost got lucky and you almost got the super Cliff Notes version of my presentation. And if that's what you would prefer, please let me know and I will just skip all the way to the end to the recommendation. But otherwise I can go through this fairly quickly. So good evening. We are entering a new era at the authority, and the communications expectations from the public have changed dramatically since our last strategic communications plan, which was completed in 2012. The technology has changed, the media landscape has changed, and just like we're redefining mobility in terms of transportation, we also need to redefine our relationship with the public. So earlier this year, we spent some time as staff talking with communications practitioners at different agencies who do similar work to us, and also talking with all of you as the board, and more extensively at APC in July to hear your feedback on what you would like our new communications strategy to be for the upcoming years. And I'm not going to read all of these to you because I know that you can read them yourselves, but this is just a sampling of what we heard. And based on that feedback, we developed a roadmap for the future. The communications strategic plan for the next few years is pretty brief. It's only about 6 pages, and it's intended to be brief to just lay out a very clear and concise direction for us to move forward as an agency and better engage with some of our audiences. So I put together a brief Cliff Notes version of that plan for you. There are 3 overarching goals, which you see here in terms of getting CCTA to be better known by the public. Based on your feedback and our conversations earlier this year, you indicated that of all of our audiences, and we speak to quite a few, serving a county with 1.2 million people, the ones that you wanted us to focus on most over the next few years were improving our communications with the general public and with the media. So it's important to be consistent with what we're saying to those groups, and what we have done is develop kind of 4 themes that all of our content and messaging will kind of map back to. These are purposely intended to be very big and very broad because, as all of you are aware, we do a lot of different things at the authority, and these are just kind of general buckets is probably the best way to think about it as we craft specific communications about projects and programs and partnerships and activities that we do. We have 5 categories of communications activities that we're proposing to focus on for the next few years. The first is community engagement, which is really focused on reaching a little deeper into some of our communities and being more visible in all of our communities and to the residents that we serve. We also do some really interesting and unique things at the authority, and we want to work on better utilizing the media to share some of that work and help inform the public who is really behind some of the improvements they see in their day-to-day lives. We're also looking to share these stories through our own channels, and maybe in a more entertaining way, a less formal way, through podcasts or social media videos. And we're also looking to renew our efforts to be a little more consistent on social media. As you know, we're a pretty lean staff, and we are supporting a few different channels for CCTA. And this is really an area where folks are starting to get most, if not all, of their news these days. This is really probably an underutilized resource for CCTA in terms of reaching those audiences that we're trying to reach. And we're also looking to kind of maintain and continually improve our website. This is often our first impression or our face to the public, and it's a living thing. Content needs to be continually updated, improvements need to be made to make sure that we're keeping up with current standards and that our content is accessible to everybody. So how are we going to do all of this? Well, we're proposing that the authority make a sustained investment in strategic communications over the next few years. And we also envision that we would use a wide bench of different firms and professionals and consultants to help us do this. In the past, we have hired a single strategic marketing and communications firm to kind of handle all of these activities. And given the increase in scope and budget that we're proposing, staff would actually like to go out for an RFQ to be able to consult with different professionals who maybe specialize in some of these areas and essentially have a much bigger bench so that we can tap into a big range of expertise that we have living here in the Bay Area. So this is the budget that staff is proposing. It's $500,000 a year for each calendar year, 2022, 2023, and 2024. What is before you tonight in the recommendation is approval for the $500,000 budget for calendar year 2022. We will be coming back and working those future budget proposals into future budgets that you will see. But that $500,000 for this upcoming year, we will be able to account for that in our planned budget. And lastly, we have really looked at how we can measure the work that we're doing and make sure that we're kind of aligning the work that's being done with the goals of the roadmap. So what you see before you is just a smattering or sample of some of the performance metrics and activities that we are proposing for 2022. The full list, as well as kind of the budget breakdown for that $500,000 is in attachment B in your packet. So with that, it's staff's recommendation that you adopt the strategic communications roadmap, proposed 2022 budget activities and performance metrics, and you authorize staff to prepare and issue an RFQ for strategic communications and marketing services. And so with that, I am happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Okay. Thank you, Lindsay. And I do see a couple of questions and we'll move to that, but I do want to thank you for, it's been interesting to watch the evolution of the plan this year. And so I thank you and others for the thought that went into that. And first I have Commissioner Mitchoff and then Commissioner Nowak. So Commissioner Mitchoff.
Thank you, Chair Geringer. Our list that goes out to these various contractors, do they have what I'll call extra points for either locally owned businesses in our service area and or women and minority owned businesses?
So yes, typically there are extra points awarded for having an office within Contra Costa County. That's usually in kind of the ranking or the scoring system for this. And there is generally also a target for use of disadvantaged businesses.
When you say disadvantage, is that women in my, I don't like that term, to be honest, because maybe that's a legal term or a federal term, but does that encompass women and minority owned businesses? Tim shaking his head. I'd like to get away from disadvantage. I think that's a pejorative term. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And Commissioner Nowak.
Yeah, I guess one of my questions is, and this is something I think I brought up somewhere early on, was, as all of us are struggling with RHNA numbers and, the questions are coming up about transportation, stuff like that. I think this is more of a suggestion than a question, is really trying to educate a lot of the public on what CCTA is doing, going forward to help reduce that traffic congestion. Because beside just having too many homes or too many houses, the second thing that everybody brings up is, what are we going to do about the traffic? And, I think CCTA is looking at a lot of innovative things, mode changes, these, mobility hubs and all these different things. And I think it's really important for the general public to hear about those future things, not just what's been done, the accomplishments, but what we're really looking at doing in the future to help people get an idea of, people are looking at that and people are thinking about it. So that's all I wanted to mention.
Thank you. And I see nodding of heads that you were heard. And anyone else on the commissioners or representatives have a comment on this before we ask for public? Commissioner Haskew.
Yeah, I am totally impressed often about how little our county and general population know about CCTA, because we are so critical to the county. So I am thrilled with this opportunity to get our name out there and get other things. And I echo Commissioner Nowak's statement, only not exactly the same way. I think we do brag about what we've accomplished, but we also brag about what we're going for. And so much of it is being in process right now. So I think we need to have a steady clip of news going out so that people know what we're doing and how we're doing it and how we're affecting their lives. And we're constantly looking at all of the things that people are worried about: climate change, overbuilding, all of the things that people are dealing with on a daily basis. It affects us, and we're trying to get good effects for them.
Yep. Well said. And I agree. And Commissioner Arnrich agreed as well. So with the comments. And I think this does give us an opportunity to get the message out there more. And Executive Director Hale.
Thank you, Chair Geringer. One thing I wanted to mention is we could also really use all of your help in a lot of this public outreach efforts. You know your communities the best. And so if you see opportunities for CCTA to come to an event or to a school district or to anywhere in your community, I am happy to come to your communities to talk about what CCTA is doing at any time. I like to call myself the friendly neighborhood executive director. And so if there's anything that you see an opportunity for me to come and talk to the community about CCTA, please let us know. We could really use your help in that regard to really get this information and get CCTA out to other channels and also through your own channels so we can start spreading the word about what we're doing at CCTA.
Thank you. And I'll save my comments about how good he is at that for the chair's report in terms of getting the word out. So any other comments? So Terry Ann, do we receive any written comments on this item?
No written public comments.
And if any member of the public would like to speak to this item, will you please raise your hand and we will give you the opportunity to do that. And I don't. Oh,
We do have
we
one
go.
public
Yes.
comment. Claudia, I'll go ahead and unmute you.
Yes.
Claudia, talk about how you could get involved in communities. This Richmond Bridge project would be a perfect opportunity to actually do a media blitz and to reach out to local news stations and bring a second perspective on it, and also invite federal agency and agencies from Sacramento, because we do bring up the issue of the EIR. And if that's not in your jurisdiction, then this is a good time to actually have a community town hall on this in Richmond. We used to have town halls and they are very productive. And I encourage you to host one. You can host one within a week if you connect with John Joya and Tom Butt. We will come. So it doesn't have to be $1 million projects. But please do that. The bridge projects are an ideal opportunity for you also to hear commuters. They were not speaking here tonight because they get up at 5 and they're in bed by 9. And if you want to reach out to the people who use the freeways, you have to have town hall meetings. So I just encourage you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Claudia. Are there any other members of the public who would like to speak to this item? And now I do not see a hand raised. And so if there are no additional comments or questions, may I have a motion on the item?
I'd move the item as presented.
And I'll second it.
Thank you. So we have a motion by Commissioner Arnrich and a second by Commissioner Mitchoff. Terry Ann, will you please conduct a roll call vote?
Okay. Commissioner Arnrich,
Yes.
Commissioner Fideli,
Aye.
Commissioner Glover,
Aye.
Commissioner Haskew, She just informed me that she had a power outage, so I will come back.
Oh.
Commissioner Hudson is absent. Commissioner Mitchell,
Yes.
Commissioner Nowak,
Yes.
Commissioner Thorpe,
Aye.
Commissioner White is absent. Vice Chair Kelly,
Yes.
Chair Geringer,
Aye.
Commissioner Haskew did not come back on. She did let me know that she is voting yes.
Thank you.
So that passes unanimously with Commissioners Hudson and White absent.
Great. Thank you, Terry Ann. And thank you again, Lindsay, and all of the others on the CCTA staff who worked on this. I'm very excited to see the direction that we take, and thank you to the commissioners for great input along the way. So moving on to our next agenda item, which was agenda item 10, is correspondence and communications. We did have one piece of correspondence that I'm sure that you all found in your packet from MTC, providing a response to our comments on the draft plan Bay Area 2050. So I encourage you to read that if you have not yet. Associated committee reports, any of the ones that we had were in your packet. And moving on to authority board and staff comments, starting with chair comments and reports, I'm just going to briefly talk about a couple of meetings that I've been on in the last couple of days. I'm sure Tim will cover them, but with the Federal Transportation Association team, with the Department of Energy, and now my brain just went, I'll let Tim say the other one on Monday. But anyway, just in terms of getting our friendly executive director out in front of people, these were talking to federal agencies and about all of the innovative programs that are happening at CCTA, with the hope of partnering and obviously, of course, for funding opportunities. Tim just does a great job. He believes in the work that we're doing and the projects that we have, both what we have done and what we are working on for the future, some of what Stephanie presented to us tonight. And so just really a privilege to sit in on those and to hear our team at work and the enthusiasm that those presentations engender on the part of the folks at the federal level. So that's my chair report. And then moving on, do we have any comments from commissioners or representatives? And Commissioner Worth?
Great. Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm just wanted to make a couple of comments in my capacity as your MTC rep, as well as the MATA Oversight Committee. And first of all, I really want to thank you all for having this meeting tonight on the Richmond Sanderfeld Bridge, the Bridge Forward Initiative, as well as the water pipe issue. I was really heartened to hear the comments from the public saying how grateful they were to be able to have this meeting in Contra Costa County with the Contra Costa transportation people and elected leaders. A number of the issues that they highlighted relative to the pipe and the bike path, I share their concerns, and I think it was really helpful to hear from both, the questions and comments that came from this board with regards to that issue, as well as the public comments. And I just wanted to highlight if the bridge project, the bike and the third lane, which are, all these things are happening on the bridge, but they are sort of distinct projects in some ways. The bike and third lane project is in fact a pilot project, and it will continue until sort of the 23-24 timeline. And the elements of the bridge are continually being evaluated. So there we'll be happy to give more information as that progresses. The other thing that I think is interesting, when we worked on regional measure 3, putting together the project list with Tim and Hisham and Marin County, the Richmond Centerfeld Bridge was a really important corridor for both of our counties. It's interesting. 2/3 of the commuters come from the East Bay, a third from Contra Costa, a third from Alameda, to go to jobs during the day in Marin. And as you well know, it's been discussed, this jobs housing imbalance is clearly in play in the Richmond Bridge. But so there are a number of projects to improve that corridor. And as you can see from the Richmond Bridge Forward project, like the work we're doing on the Bay Bridge Forward project and the Dumbarton Bridge Forward project, is to look at ways that we can increase access through those bridge corridors, both multimodal as well as transit. So that's, I think we will see in the next couple of years, when we remove, go to the full automatic tolling, remove those toll gantries, the initiatives that some of the carpool initiatives that we're looking at for 580. So I think the goal is, in fact, to reduce that congestion that you all see, that know that corridor, westbound in the morning, and increase the access and the throughput on those bridges. So I also want to express my appreciation to Tim Hale for his leadership as we work together on with Marin County on these initiatives, all with the goal of improving the transportation resources for our residents. So thank you again. I'm really grateful that you took the time tonight to really hear in detail about these projects, and really were able to give the substantive input. And I think it's going to make a big difference in what ultimately is especially the pipe project at this point. And we'll keep you posted on the other initiatives as they move forward. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Commissioner Worth, and thank you for representing us in all of that work. Anybody else have a commissioner or representative report? Going once, going twice. Okay, so we will move on to our, I'm going to start just having this the friendly executive director report. So Tim, when I do your report.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. Really appreciate it. So as you all know, it's really important to tell our federal partners about what we're doing at CCTA, and especially because we've got two really big innovation grants that you heard about tonight, the ATC MTD grant, the ADS grant. And so yesterday we met with the Build America Bureau, and they are actually kind of the door to open up to a lot of different alternative funding sources. So we're talking about private activity bonds, TIFIA, which is a federal financing loan program, as well as a rural urban program. So we're looking at how to leverage those programs on some of the projects that we're working on here at CCTA. We also met with FTA and got to congratulate Nira Fernandez, the new FTA administrator, on her promotion or her appointment to the FTA administrator. And then we also got to share with them a lot what we're doing with the ADS project, because they are administrating that grant. And then also talk about some of the P3 opportunities that we're talking about around transit, as well as some of the other things we're really focused on around transit, such as the integrated transit plan, the 680 express bus service. And then we also met with Department of Energy today, and we always get great pleasure meeting with them. We always seem to be really aligned in terms of electric vehicle readiness, zero emission buses, and so it was a great meeting today. And we're going to continue this. We're doing a round robin right now with all of the departments. Main reason why, as you all know, there's an infrastructure bill in play, and so we're making sure we're front and center in front of these agencies as that continues to evolve, so that way we're positioned well for additional funding and discretionary funding. Speaking about discretionary funding, so as you all know, we did receive a $3.5 million grant from the governor's office back in 2018 for Gomentum Station. And so that provided a number of improvements, and that was a big part of Assemblymember Grayson. And so we just recently hosted Assemblymember Grayson and Rebecca Bauer-Cahan at Gomentum Station. And we are trying to work with them to strategize on getting some potential funding, more funding for what we're doing with our innovation program. I'll keep it short and brief tonight, but we have been having a number of Gomentum tours, including MTC staff, which we talked a lot about the bus on shoulder testing and looking for regional funding to fund that. And you heard from Stephanie on that today. We also were able to have a tour with Chad Edison, the Chief Deputy Secretary for Rail and Transit with the California State Transportation Agency. He's a really big deal. He controls right now all of the transit intercity capital rail program funding. And as you know, there's a lot of horse trading going on right now with high-speed rail, as well as general funds for more transit. And he's at the forefront of that. So we were lucky enough to spend about 3 hours with him talking about transit, Gomentum stations, shared mobility hubs. And he really, really likes what we're doing here at CCTA. It was a great, great meeting. And it's really hard to pin that guy down for 3 hours. So we were really, really gracious. He was able to grace us with his presence for that long. As you all know, we are still working on getting all of you out the Gomentum station. Those tours are getting ready to start for some of you. And so as you, I'm sure Terry Ann and others are working with you to schedule those tours out to Gomentum station. The county gave a great tour of CCTA staff of the Byron Airport and Buchanan Airport and what they're doing with their drone program. And I can't tell you enough how excited we are to really work with them to partner and expand what they're doing out there. There's a company out there called X-Wing at Buchanan Airport actually testing full-blown autonomous flying. It's amazing to see that type of stuff is happening right here in our backyard in Contra Costa County, and it's going to be really exciting to continue leveraging those programs. I know ferry service is also really important to you, and so WIDA has kicked off their 2050 service vision and business plan. So Peter Engel, John Hong has been spending a lot of time with them to advocate on our behalf to expand ferry service to Hercules, Martinez, Pittsburgh, and Antioch. And so we had our first focus group meeting, and we're working closely with them to making sure we get expanded ferry service into Contra Costa County. That concludes my report, and happy to answer any questions.
Supervisor Mitchoff.
Thank you. I just want to inform Mr. Hale and the group that our current airport manager has accepted a position in Ventura County and will be leaving. I know, but we've got a plan in place, Tim, not to worry. I will be talking with Supervisor Burgess, and I think you will be very pleased with where we're going. We will do a recruitment process, but that whole business environment that you're talking about will continue. And I'll talk to you offline about that.
Thank you for that update. Any other, I thought I saw a hand come up. Tim, thank you for the report, but really thank you for all of the work that you're doing to make sure that all the key stakeholders know what's going on at CCTA. So I think we will now move to your calendars are in your packet, and we will move to the moment that I know my husband's waiting on, which is adjourning for dinner, which is adjourning the meeting until our next meeting on November 17th at 6 p.m. And thank you all very much for being here and for your involvement. The meeting is adjourned.